Hello, and welcome to Civics, a program on Arlington Independent Media. I'm Michael Shea, the host for this episode of Civics. On Civics, we meet people who are involved with their community, as volunteers, as activists, and as leaders. Tonight, we are happy to be joined by Inta Malis, who has been involved with PTAs, civic associations, planning commissions, a variety of things around Arlington County. Inta, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Inta, you had a lot of volunteer experience, but was there a moment when you felt you were transitioning and you were acting in more of a civic activist role?
Absolutely. I think I'd done quite a bit of volunteering work, and I really saw that as sort of helping with projects that were already in place. But I really became an activist over an issue that happened in the neighborhood. There were a group of neighbors that decided to close a street, and I mean, this is your basic local politics. Mm-hmm. Wanted to close the street. The rest of the neighborhood didn't know anything about it. All of a sudden, there's a big community meeting. I had never participated that way before. One of my obstacles was that I'm not a public speaker, and I never was. And at that meeting, I got up in front of 200 people and started to speak my mind. And I couldn't believe it myself because, I mean, I'd gone to Toastmasters, I'd done everything. And I started to speak my mind, and I was just so puzzled about that afterwards. And it occurred to me that perhaps the reason that I never got up and spoke as a public speaker was I didn't have anything to say that I really wanted to convey. But at that moment, I think that marked the transition from volunteer to activist.
And I'm curious, did you go to the meeting knowing you were going to speak, or was it you got there and realized, hey, I should speak?
I got there and I was just mad. I was just mad. I was annoyed, and it just started tumbling out. You know, how was it possible that things had gotten this far without the community being involved, with the entire neighborhood being involved? And in some ways, that sort of represents the kind of work, activism I've been doing ever since, and that's really in the community. Mm-hmm. Quality of life issues, very local, all Arlington-centered, but things that affect people on a daily basis. I think it's just so important that people be involved in the decisions that affect them, and so I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to help organize and encourage people to get involved.
So what did you do after that meeting? What
you want the whole story?
Well, what was the next idea you had?
Well, the next idea was how did things get this far without the broader neighborhood being involved? And of course, you turn to your civic association leadership and you say, well, what was that about? And as it turned out, our leaders were rather insular. And so we sort of had a coup. So at that meeting, not only did I speak out, I met a lot of other people in the neighborhood that I'd never met before that had similar concerns. You know, how did we get this far? And so we organized. And it was a sort of an insurgency. You know, we got a lot of resistance from the established civic association. We had to kind of push things a little bit. We got a lot of pushback. Who are you guys, you know, to be pushing? And this is all, remember, very local. They got leafleted. People denounced us for being pushy. But eventually, it worked out.
And what role did you play after? Were you part of the leadership?
You know, talk about one thing leading to another. You know, I sort of was part of this cabal that was pushing this change. But I was like maybe fourth down in the leadership role. And all of a sudden, everybody in front of me either moved out of the neighborhood or had some reason to resign. And within 6 months, I was president of the Civic Association. I can say I wasn't entirely prepared for that. But one of the things that you learn about civic activism is that there's not a book. You really do learn on the job. Now, there's people and places to go in Arlington that will help you, but you really have to rely on yourself to figure out how to do this, at least getting started.
Right. How long were you the Civic Association president?
I think I had 4 years, maybe. We did quite a bit of work. to try to engage the broader community and broader neighborhood. One of the things that Arlington provides that's very helpful for activating civic associations is the Neighborhood Conservation Program. That is a program that has representatives from every neighborhood in Arlington, and it really empowers the neighbors to suggest public improvements, capital programs. There's a bond fund that provides money, and so your job as a neighborhood leader is to organize your community around what it is that you'd like to see as an improvement. And the tool that they suggest and use is actually creating a neighborhood plan, an NC plan for your neighborhood. And so that really became the foundation in our neighborhood for sort of reconstituting the Civic Association. We create, but we were sort of pulling people in off the street. So if we needed a beautification committee chair, we walked around the neighborhood and said, who's got the best lawn? Right? Who's got the nicest landscaping? And we just walked up the door and said, would you be our beautification committee chair? And it turned out they said yes. It was great.
Did you explain to them? It's because you've got such a great lawn. I mean, I think the flattery might have helped.
It worked. It worked. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But that's what civic activism is about. Is about opportunities.
And it's not just sort of creating this wish list. As you say, there's a bond fund dedicated to it. So the resources are there. This gives neighbors a chance to shape what is happening.
If there was one thing that sort of led from my just being sort of a local neighborhood activist to really getting involved in understanding how Arlington works, it was the Neighborhood Conservation Program. Mm-hmm. I maintain to this day that anybody who'd like to really understand how local government works, just come and sit in on a year's worth of meetings, and you will see every neighborhood issue discussed and debated, and see how county staff interacts. Prior to being involved, I think I probably had the same general perspective of government. It's inaccessible, it's mysterious, you don't know how it works, people are running things, it's all sort of a black box kind of an operation. You go to NCAC meetings and you find that staff is approachable, that they're interested in your issues. They provide you means of improving your neighborhood. And you start to learn that how Arlington works. And I would say that if there was an ambassador program for Arlington and for bringing in neighborhood activists, it would be that program.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine particularly at the beginning, as you were learning effectively this job of the neighborhood civic association president, it must have been very time consuming. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, it was, because you are creating something basically out of nothing.
Right.
Now that's also what you kind of like about it is you have something that really didn't exist in any kind of structure, and you build a structure so that you hope that it can be sustained, that it doesn't depend on one person going forward. But it's a very creative process and can be very satisfying if you enjoy working with people.
Right. And then for 4 years you did that, and then you got engaged a lot with Columbia Pike. And
well, actually, that was sort of an overlap, because while I was president of my neighborhood, which is a Columbia Pike neighborhood, there was some planning going on, and this would have been in the late 1998, around then, 1999. Where we were actually, the county was planning a vision for Columbia Pike. What kind of a community were we trying to create? There had been a serious lack of investment in Columbia Pike. It wasn't growing like other parts of Arlington. People were concerned that the lack of investment might lead to decline. And so the county took a proactive step to initiate a planning process. And so as a Civic Association president, I was part of that planning process. And again, I just took to it. I just found it incredible, the opportunity that citizens had to actually input into a plan, to actually shape the plan, and to criticize the plan, and to put brakes on the plan when you thought that maybe things had gone a little too far. So that's what that was the transition from sort of local neighborhood to slightly broader, the Columbia Pike community.
Right. And very long range. I mean, any plan of that type is looking I may not have the right numbers, but 50 years into
Yes,
the
it
future.
is.
It's a very long-range plan, and
Yes.
it's very much both big ideas and a lot of details.
Huge amount. You've got that exactly right. There's a big concept. We
Right.
wanted to make Columbia Pike a walkable main street. Where people could shop, have restaurants, parks. Kind of a complete neighborhood. But the details to make that happen took years and years, and it's still going on. So after a large plan like that is adopted, you have to turn it in. This involved development, so you have to turn it into zoning ordinance. And again, zoning ordinances then becomes very detailed. Part of the success of any community activist or anyone involved in this process is endurance. The ability to actually stay with the process for a long period of time to see it through.
And just to be clear, something like a zoning ordinance is not just staff work. It's not. It's not. Well, there's the professionals who deal with this.
There.
It's the planning commission and the people that are engaged in that really
Yes.
sweating a lot of the details.
As you may know, I'm also now a member of the Planning Commission, and it pretty much models what the process is about. First there's a long-range process where you really outline the broad vision. What is it that you want to do? Then the next step is the zoning. What is the detail? And that's the detail that is down to how far apart of the door is going to be, how wide is the sidewalk, how many street lights are you going to have, what kind of benches are there going to be, all those kinds of things that before I just used to think happened.
Right.
Somebody just, you find out that actually somebody has to make decisions about all of them. As an activist, you don't necessarily want to be making all the decisions, but you want to make sure that the decisions that are being made are true to the vision.
Right.
And that is the important part. Then the next part of it is when you actually get a development plan or an idea comes, again, you're comparing it in a very detailed way to, is this an expression of what we had in mind? Is this what we had? Is this the idea? On Columbia Pike, we used a new form of zoning that had never been used in Arlington before, a form-based code, which on the one hand provided the community with a lot of details as to what to expect, as well as the development community, pretty clear as to what the expectations were. But in order to get there, you really do have to think about, well, what kind of windows are you going to have? When the doors swing out, should we allow a little extra room for that door swing? Is there enough room for cafe seating? I'm not recommending that every community activist go down this road, but for some that have the endurance and the interest in really getting into the details, it's really very gratifying.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned before on the Civic Association work, you really had to learn on the job. You really
Yes.
had to learn by doing.
Yes.
Is that just as true with planning commissions and with the work in Columbia Pike, or are there skills you can bring to it? Or is it more-
Obviously there's a predisposition that you bring to it.
That's
Okay.
pretty good to put it.
Are you interested in planning? Are you able to organize your ideas? Can you communicate your ideas? So those are things that perhaps I brought to it. But the technical information, there's a whole vocabulary of planning that you learn. There's a whole vocabulary of zoning ordinance that you learn. All of those things you do learn on the job. And you learn by observing. And so again, I think you're successful if you're able to observe and sort of make conclusions about, how your colleagues work effectively, what worked for them and maybe what wasn't as effective. And then you try to moderate your approach. But there's no job description for a planning commissioner. We come in all different stripes.
Right. Well, that's probably a good thing.
That's a
in
good
general.
thing.
Okay, quick check though. You started this activism by launching to public speaking.
Yes.
Have you become a public speaker? Or what?
A reluctant
Or
public
reluctant.
speaker.
You're still reluctant on that.
It really depends.
Yeah.
If I'm in a meeting and something sets me off,
Right. Right.
you can't. I'm out there.
Right.
If I have to go testify, I do it. But it's still not my favorite thing to do. But
Right.
It's all about having something to say.
Right. But to stay on this, being involved with planning commission type role or a development plan type role, we were talking about this before. I recently read a quote from an architect in New York City who's very involved in their planning, and he expresses his role as you control nothing, but you hope to influence everything. Do you think that's accurate, and is that maybe a sense of satisfaction to doing all this work?
I think that's very accurate.
Mm-hmm.
It's very accurate for many us who try to influence, but actually have no power to decide. That's sort of, it's the kind of the environment that we work in. We work in ideas. We try to convince people that, we have an idea that ought to be pursued. But ultimately, there are decision makers in the system. As our elected officials make decisions, our professional staff make recommendations. So you try to influence both of them. But you have to really, and this is the hardest part, be prepared not to prevail, because you have to remember you are one data point. As right as I think I am sometimes, there are other data points that board members have to listen to, and I respect that completely.
Right. Particularly, I would think, in a county like Arlington, where I don't have numbers on this, but it seems like we are above average in terms of people that get engaged and people that speak up.
Yes.
So there's a lot of data points.
There's a lot of data points, and that's another reason why it's very satisfying to be active in this community. It's not just that we have very qualified professional staff, or that we have really dedicated public officials, elected officials, but our community is educated, it's affluent, and there's an expression that we use. It's where the experts are in the audience, because our community, a lot of people work for the federal government and they're experts in their fields. I mean, they know as much or more about certain topic areas as our professional staff does, and our professional staff look to them for leadership. And so that's another thing that makes it really fun to work here, is that you get to meet the people that are really expert and very talented. And that has been a really important part of Arlington's success. Its ability to leverage its community to help provide better ideas and new ways of doing things. It really is pretty fundamental to why we have done so many things as well as we have.
Right. Let's go back to the Columbia Pike development plan for a moment. I think you described it. It's the process itself of just drafting and getting to the implementation. It's about 15 years or so. Is that a fair?
We took it in pieces.
Right.
So the first thing we did is we planned our commercial nodes, and that probably took. I mean, there were a lot of false starts. It takes a while to figure out what makes change in a community.
Right.
We thought at first, well, maybe if we just improve the public infrastructure, make nicer sidewalks, plant some street trees, development will come.
Right.
It didn't happen that way.
Right.
We did some of that, but it didn't. So we planned the commercial nodes, and we finished that. Then we had to plan the street. We finished that. And in the last 3 years, we just completed a plan for the residential areas of Columbia Pike. Very proud of that one, because Arlington has always had a very firmly fixed in mind that smart growth, that transit-oriented development is where what sustains our community, what's made us successful. Smart growth has never been able to reconcile its relationship to affordable housing. Right. In the past, it tends to displace. It tends to drive land values, or redevelopment causes displacement. This 3-year study was a smart growth development plan with the purpose fixed, and that was to preserve affordable housing that exists on Columbia Pike. So it was really a rather amazing plan where, on the one hand, we're trying to create redevelopment. At the same time, we're trying to preserve a really important existing part of what we thought was very important on Columbia Pike, and that is the diversity of cultures and incomes that we have today.
Right.
We adopted the vision framework in July.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in an implementation phase.
Right. So on the residential side, it's still very new in terms of being done.
It's not.
The commercial
The commercial has been implemented.
It's been a minute, but have you been able to can the community see
Yes.
any of the effects? Okay. And
Yes.
what did I
Well,
guess
and that's the most amazing part of
Well,
being an activist is,
right.
You started small. I start small. You say, okay, let's get the sidewalk fixed. Okay, wow, the sidewalk got fixed. That's pretty cool. Let's get some street lights. Wow. And now you're working on a larger scale, and you say, let's get
Right.
some development
Right.
going. And all of a sudden, since I've been involved, since the code was adopted in 2003,
right.
there have been 6, 7, 8 projects that have been built that are out of the ground.
And is it what you expected? As a commission member, as a planner,
It's
for back then?
actually.
Is it working out like you saw, or is it surprised you?
It was really hard for me to see what was going to happen. Back then I didn't know a lot about development. When we were saying, conceptually what we wanted to see. I'm amazed. I think there's been such a transformation in street life already. These buildings aren't. Don't form a critical mass yet. There's a couple here, there's one here, there's one there. But a lot of the old, parking lot, low scale stuff that, really doesn't attract transit-oriented or pedestrian activity. And yet, even so, you see more people on the street walking, biking, it's changed, just the beginning of it has changed the vibrancy, and I wouldn't have believed it.
Okay. So you're pleasantly surprised.
I'm pleasantly surprised.
Right.
I'm pleasantly surprised by what I see and the relative speed in which it happened.
What we just mentioned, Arlington is above average in terms of engaging people. But are there things that you think we could do differently that would engage even more people, or make their engagement more effective?
Engaging people, and anybody that's been a civic association leader knows this. Civic associations go through cycles. Mm-hmm. What gets people out is a good crisis. Somebody proposed something, and everybody comes out with the pitchforks, and that was my history, right? Yeah. With the street. All of a sudden we're all out there, and we go, my God, we got to get together. We got to stand strong. We fix the sidewalks. We fix the speeding problem. We fix the sidewalks. All of a sudden things look pretty good, right? Now we're content. So you can't. Civic activism has to be nurtured. What do you do when there's no crisis? What you do is you find other ways of getting people and creating community. And your rationale is that you want community so that when the next crisis comes, you're not starting from scratch. Right. And it's very difficult to create community in any other way but through retail activities, very retail, one-on-one recruiting to get people involved. The county board has a initiative that they've been working on all year called Place, and that is talking about this very thing. They're looking at what else can we do. Can we use social networking? Can we use technology more? As people become more accustomed to using technology and interacting to technology, are there opportunities to capture people and into community? But it's still, ultimately, you create the platform, but you have to track people one by one, which makes it interesting, but also makes it pretty daunting task.
Yeah. As a citizen, you were involved with some of the planning for the Place initiative?
I was on the advisory group for the Place and participated with staff in planning some of the aspects. I think what's really been important about this initiative is that it really has been integrated into staff's work life. They're being trained in techniques of community engagement. They're looking at including community engagement success as part of their performance criteria, so that that is part of their evaluation. How successful were they? They're being given some new tools to work with, and it's everything there's a shakeout period,
Right,
and we'll
right.
see what works. But it's very exciting, and it's very much a, let's say grassroots within the county.
Right, right. And I can say this from my personal experience serving on some committees. One of the things that people in Arlington maybe don't always realize is the county staff does a great job of making themselves available and meeting with, and it ends up being to make it convenient for citizens like myself, like yourself, who have day jobs. They meet in the evening, they meet early in the morning, so I think the county staff deserves a lot of credit for extending their working hours to get that citizen collaboration.
There's a meeting going on every night of the week in
There is,
Arlington.
or not just, there are meetings going on every night of
Meetings,
the week, I think.
that's right. There's more than one going on every night.
So what's next for you, or what do you think? I guess I also would ask, maybe not what's next immediately, but what are some things you haven't worked on that you would like to work on?
Oh,
what's your what do you think?
That's a tough one because I ask myself, I've gotten pretty involved. Why did I get involved? Sort of what kept me going. And part of it is simply looking around and seeing what needs to be done.
Right.
And so I haven't seen that thing yet.
Okay.
I'm very busy doing what I'm doing now.
Right.
But that's really the important thing. And my daughter is now, she's 22. She's out of college, and she's going, oh, but Mom, what am I going to do? What am I going to be? What kind of a job am I going to have? And so anyway, so my daughter is asking me these questions, and I said, don't worry about what you want to be or do. Look around and see what needs to be done.
Right. Right.
See what you think needs to be done and what you think you can help with.
Right.
And I think that I never planned on being a community activist. I never thought I was going to get into this at all. But it really came down to seeing something that needed to be done and that there was an opportunity to actually do it.
I think that's very good advice for anyone who is either moving to a new community or just they've lived in a community for a while and they want to find some way to get more involved. It's more reacting than having necessarily your own ideas. So just to be clear, are you still on the Planning Commission?
I've just finished my 9th year on the Planning Commission.
And you're coming back for 10th year?
I'm coming back for several more years.
Several more years. Okay, very good. Well,
Yes.
I'm sure we're all glad. I live in Arlington. We're glad to have you on the Planning Commission with your attention to detail and your dedication to it. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's very nice.
I want to thank you for coming on the show. I also want to thank our volunteer crew here at Arlington Independent Media. They've been great in producing this program. But most of all, I want to thank Inta Malis for working so hard to make our community a better place to live.
Thank you very
Thank you very
much.
much.